My name is Keith Dominguez. I'm the moderator of today's program, which is Perspectives of First Generation Attorneys. I'm very excited about the panel that we put together today. I have a group of practicing attorneys, a law student, and also people that have moved on from the practice of law into different parallel career paths. So I'm going to let everyone introduce themselves, and then I'm going to introduce myself, and we're going to get started. So, Brenda.
Thanks, Keith. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brenda Correa. In terms of background, I am first generation in my immediate family to go to college and law school. My parents immigrated from Colombia. My first language was Spanish. I went to law school at Pace Law, and my first job as a lawyer was at the Manhattan DA's office. I've worked in actually three law firms. The longest part of my career was at the Commission on Judicial Conduct. And I recently started in my new role as Deputy Director of Investigations at the Commission on Prosecutorial Conduct in March of this year. And I'm really excited to be on this panel.
Hello, everyone. My name is Irina Gomelskaya. I'm currently Director of Alumni Services at NYU Law, and I provide career coaching and advising to NYU Law alumni. I've been in this role for about 7 months. I also have my own coaching practice, Ignite JD Strategies, LLC. I obtained my first coaching certification after I decided to leave the practice of law in 2010. So by way of background, I went straight from undergrad. I double majored in economics and psychology at Barnard, then got my JD at UPenn. I went through the typical OCI process and started my first job in the financial restructuring practice group at Stroke. And practiced there for a while, found it really exciting and fulfilling, but ultimately decided that my actual passion is to mentor and coach law students and lawyers and help them navigate their careers, inspire them to succeed, which is why I decided to leave the practice of law, receive my first coaching certification. And since then, I've worked in several roles at 2 law schools in recruitment, in various professional development positions. And I am first generation law student. My family immigrated from the USSR when I was still a teenager. So my first language was Russian. And I am really passionate about providing mentorship and support to first gen professionals. So I'm excited to be here today.
Yes. Hi. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Simone Sterling. I am currently a project manager at McDermott, Will, and Schulte. I graduated from Indiana University School of Law in Bloomington, Indiana. I'm a first generation professional. My family is originally from St. Vincent and the Grenadines in the West Indies. I immigrated to this country when I was about 10 years old. Went to college here, double majored at Binghamton University in PPL, which is philosophy, politics, and law, and history. I graduated in 3 years and then went straight through to law school. After law school, I've pretty much worked in the court system and then, transitioned over into working in project management, working in financial services, and now in the legal technology space. I'm very passionate, as others have said, about giving back to the first generational, community, because, I myself am part of that community, and I think it's important to give back to this community. So thank you so much. I'm happy to be on the panel as well.
Hey everyone, my name is Willis Huynh. I graduated from West Point for undergrad, and I'm currently a 3L at Brooklyn Law. Before law school, I went to West Point, and I was the first in my family to attend college, and I'm the first in my family to obviously attend law school. I was in the Army for just under a decade, and this upcoming summer, I'll be an incoming associate at Wilkie Foreign Gallagher doing asset management work. At BLS right now, Brooklyn Law, I focus primarily on corporate and transactional classes. But truly, I'm very passionate about mentorship and flattening the knowledge curve that exists for first-gen law students and hopefully in the future for lawyers. And I'm excited to be on this panel.
Thank you, Willis. And my name is Keith Dominguez. So now I'm currently Senior Associate Director of Career and Professional Development at Brooklyn Law School. So I'm a career counselor for law students, and I work with students from all different backgrounds for all different types of career paths. Me personally, I know my grandparents all immigrated to this country from Cuba and Italy, but I am a first generation professional. I'm the first in my family to pursue higher education, to be a lawyer or anything like that. And I'm the typical, someone told me you should be a lawyer when I was a kid, and it stuck with me. And I pursued that even though I didn't know what it meant and I didn't know what it entailed through undergrad at St. John's and law school at Hofstra. That was always the idea, but I never really stopped to take the time to figure out what does it actually mean to be a lawyer. And because I was first gen, I didn't really have that many people that I could ask. So I was, foot on the gas, K through JD. I went to Hofstra and I had a really good experience there. And, I was able to get recruited by Fried Frank. So I started my career at Fried Frank in their capital markets group. And I did that for a couple of years before moving on to Davis and Gilbert, which is a very nice mid-sized firm. And there I practiced M&A, venture capital, just general corporate for a few more years. So I practiced a little under 5 years before coming here to Brooklyn. And I've been at Brooklyn for 4 years now already, advising students. Willis is one of my students. I've been speaking to him since before he's even came to law school. So I really do enjoy what I do. And I believe strongly that, now more than ever, being a first generation attorney is really a great thing. And there's more resources that are available to us. But I think the issue is often that we don't know, or we just don't utilize those resources. So part of why I wanted to do this program is just an information session for, to hear about first generation attorneys' background and experiences. And I wanted to discuss some of the things that first generation attorneys can do to succeed in this field. So my first question is really, for everyone, why did you go to law school? What was your reason for going to law school?
So, Keith, for me, and I don't know if it might be similar for the other panelists, as a child of immigrant parents, I basically had three options. It was be an engineer, be a doctor, or be a lawyer. And I did not have any interest in being an engineer or a doctor, to my parents' significant dismay. And I always enjoyed debating. It was very encouraged in my family. My family is very passionate, deeply passionate about politics, pretty much about anything. So arguing was something that came very naturally to me. And so I thought it was probably the right fit for me. What drove me to law school, what excited me about law school is I felt very passionate I really didn't know what I wanted to do, but I wanted to seek justice in some way. And I really didn't know what that would look like, but that was what where my passion lied. I just wanted to advocate and, I guess, root for the underdog when I went to law school.
Brenda, I will go next because your experience really resonates with me. And as I mentioned, my family emigrated from the former USSR. We're from Kyiv, Ukraine. And I was inspired to go to law school because, well, for several reasons. First of all, I was looking for a career path that would provide, financial stability for my family. And that was important to me, having seen my parents' immigration experience. So I wanted to sort of aim high, and they encouraged me to set my goals pretty high. And also because I also, wanted to learn the laws of this country to be able to advocate for my family, for my community if needed, and to offer support to other people. And so I loved learning. I loved research and writing and creative writing and intellectual curiosity. And really, I thrived in law school. It was difficult, but it was also very fulfilling. And for me, it was an opportunity to make a life for myself in this country and, to some extent, sort of meet my parents' expectations that were, pretty high. So, yeah.
For me, I think, it's tied back to the whole immigration story. Although I never really had an interest in immigration law, I saw how having an immigration lawyer impacted, how we were able to adjust our status in this country. My parents coming from the Caribbean. So I think that was initially, sort of my first introduction to seeing how lawyers can make a difference and change people's lives. So I think from the advocacy standpoint and just from the, changes that, lawyers can influence in people's lives from that perspective. And I went to Martin Luther King High School, which we had a Law and Justice Institute. And so I think even from my earlier days in high school, and participating in internships, particularly ones with this very bar association, those were things that sort of influenced my wanting to go to law school.
Yeah, this is a little bit fresher for me, I guess, but I was just always so impressed by attorneys, right? Like a law degree to me was such a systematized way of thinking, but it also afforded a lot of creativity that I think being in law school, you kind of take for granted. I thought it would help me become a better reader, a better writer, a better communicator, and those are all skills that I really wanted. But as I've progressed through law school, I just developed a genuine interest of how regulatory frameworks shape business transactions. And, that may be like either a nerdy way of thinking about it, but it's such a big part of being an attorney and being an attorney in New York. So I'm really excited to continue doing that.
Yeah, thank you. And then for me, I was, like I said, I always knew that I wanted to go to law school, but before I even know what it meant. So at a couple of different times in my life, I was able to, as early as high school, take a course in business law. And I really liked business law enough that I selected pre-law as my major in undergrad. I did a year of that and decided I definitely want to go to law school. This is for me. I want to be in a position that, this is this is my reason, but everyone where I come from either goes into a labor union, goes to be a police officer, or does sanitation, which are all great jobs. And now the piece of some of those things, especially doing sanitation, seem very nice. But I always wanted to do a little bit more. I wanted to push myself further. I always did well in school, so for me, I saw law school as a real challenge that I could challenge myself and I could strive to just do something different than everyone else around me, everyone else I've ever seen did. So for me, law school, ended up being a really good thing because I really got to challenge myself and push myself. So, and for me, it was always going to be transactional law from the business law courses I took in undergrad and even high school. So I always knew I didn't necessarily want to be a litigator. That wasn't for me. So I wanted to be a business lawyer. And that's basically what I was able to get out of law school. I really enjoyed my 2L year and 3L year because I got to focus on the transactional courses like BizOrg, securities regulations, private equity, and I got to learn about that space. So for me, I went to law school to be a business lawyer, and that's what I ended up becoming. So I think it was full circle, got what I wanted, and then what I wanted ended up not being necessarily what I wanted to do long term. So I would say the next question is for everyone. What piece of advice would you give to a first generation law student? Could be on navigating law school, your specific career path, or breaking into a particular practice area, or any general advice for first generation law students.
For me, I would say seek out mentorships and connections. I think those are critical as a first generation law student and also a lawyer, first generation lawyer. The reason I say that is because I personally felt so clueless going through navigating that whole experience and not having any lawyers in my family, no lawyers in my community. I think having the connections with professors that can really help you with all even the little things. And like Keith said earlier, you don't know what you don't know, and that really is true. To even from the basics as to what to wear, what's appropriate to wear during an interview, what's appropriate to wear once you get the job, all those little things. And then on a larger scale, when you're looking for those jobs, those connections can really be critical by professors. And then when you're in the positions to really find people, find the mentors. And I say find because it doesn't always, sometimes it will happen organically, but I think as a first generation lawyer, it's critical for you to seek that out. And the onus, I think, may be on you to really find the people that you can relate to and that can really help guide you and mentor you in your legal path.
I will jump in. And as I reflect on my sort of life, my experience, my career, I would say my advice would be worry less about what others think and believe in yourself. I think for a while I was very self-conscious about the fact that I had an accent, and here I am. I chose a profession where we rely so much on our written and spoken, voice all the time. I lacked confidence because I felt like, oh, I need to speak to all these important people, partners, senior associates, judges, clients, and do I have what it takes, right, to communicate in a certain way and present myself? And so, all these fears and insecurities really helped me back for a while until I just faced them and I said, you know what, I have a lot to offer. I'm proud of my accomplishments. I'm going to find a work setting where I feel valued and appreciated, and that's aligned with who I am. And so that, I think, for me became sort of a pivotal moment. And so I wish I kind of realized those things much earlier in my career.
So for me, I think forming community, joining affinity groups, whether in the workplace or at your law schools, if you're still a law student. For me, at Indiana University, I joined the Black Law Student Association because I was from New York and I was in the Midwest and I had no idea, how to navigate the sort of cultural shift when I went out there to law school. So BALSA was critically important for me to join that. And then when I was an undergrad, I was part of the Caribbean Student Association at Binghamton University. And that was like really, helpful for me to, have that community. But another thing I would say is, network. And I know that that sounds scary to a lot of people because they don't really necessarily always understand what it means to network. But I guess just to demystify it, it's just a very organic process, and it is a skill that you can learn that is a lifelong skill that you will always utilize as you go through your career. So building relationships, and developing those relationships as you go through your career, I think is something that is critically important. And as Brenda mentioned, having mentors and having people that are, sounding boards, your sort of board of advisors that you can go to as you go through your career. So those are the things that I would point to.
Yeah, I would say my one piece of advice has two parts. It's to first learn the hidden curriculum. I think we all kind of alluded to it, but there's this sort of unspoken expectation of how attorneys, I guess, display themselves or how they act, how they speak. And there is a hidden curriculum there. And I think modern day, it's spoken about more. Like firms may actually tell you exactly what they're looking for instead of like beating around the bush, like responsiveness with emails or just making eye contact when you speak. Like those are things that no one should have to really say, but matter. So that's part one. But second is to simply master the basics, like especially if for the law students listening in, there's no secret, right? You read all your cases, you write case briefs, you prepare for class, and you take your practice exams, and then hopefully you crush your exams. And I'm in my last year of law school, and that still is the formula every single year. It's there. No one has like a special document that has actually all the answers. It's the fact that the answers are right in front of you and it's on you to simply master the basics, right? Like know the issue, know the rules, know how the court thinks about this particular issue. And I think there's something calming, there's solace to knowing that everyone has practically the same resources available to them to do as well as the best law student within a law school.
Right, and I thank you for that, Willis, because that's my advice is really to utilize your resources. There's a lot of resources at your disposal within your law school, outside your law school. So I would say the more in law school and in your career as a lawyer, the more you put into it, the more you get out of it. So most people don't realize there's so many things at your disposal when you're a law student. And my next question is going to revolve around resources, but I would say figure out what things are there for your disposal. You have a career counselor. You probably have an academic advisor. If you're struggling, there's academic success. You probably have a registrar to help you register for your classes. There's a lot of resources that you can use. But then even beyond that, when you go into practice, there are a lot of resources for you, whether within your employer, outside with bar associations like the New York City Bar, which is great. So make sure you figure out what your resources are and utilize them, because we don't know, like Will said, we don't know necessarily the answer to everything. But as lawyers, we figure things out. That's what we're trained to do. And when it pertains to your career and your career progression, you need to there's resources available that you can use to help you in really all different phases, whether it's your professional development, networking, even your personal life. You might say you have young kids and you're struggling to figure out how to juggle raising your kids with your career. There's resources for that. So figuring out the resources, I think, is very, very important. So I would say, my next question is, what are some resources that you all found very, very helpful? At least, one resource that you found helpful either in law school or in your career as a first generation attorney.
I found a few resources helpful in first in law school. I would say the Career Center was really helpful in terms of helping me just draft cover letters and resumes. I know that they're so helpful. They even help you with like mock interviews, but particularly just having not really done a cover letter before entering law school. I don't even think I had done a resume. And I know a lot of my friends had, they had parents who are lawyers. They could send it to their mom or dad, and their mom or dad could help. I didn't have that. So for, me, I thought the Career Center actually really played a vital role in helping, particularly, I think, students that were similarly situated to my situation. And in terms of echoing what Simone had said earlier, I think Affinity, I joined the Latin American Law Students Association. I thought that was a really valuable resource just to find a community where I felt I could just talk to people that were going through similar experiences. And then professionally, I really have found that the New York City Bar to be a really terrific program. I can't say that I joined it as a junior lawyer because I just felt too busy. But to the extent that, people can, I would definitely encourage them to do so, even as a young lawyer, because it's just such a terrific networking opportunity. And so if you can, but whenever you can, I would definitely join the New York City Bar, because to me, I felt like it's been very rewarding in terms of being involved and just networking. So those are the resources that I would recommend.
Yeah, thank you for the shout out to Career Services. I appreciate that. I'm gonna bring you to orientation to tell my students that. So, and then, yeah, I mean, even for law students, I encourage all my 1Ls to join the city. Well, all my students, but from 1L year, they could join the city bar. It's very cheap for law students, and you can join a committee, particularly on something that you're interested in. Like when I was in law school, I joined the sports law committee. Now I'm on CAM, but being a law student and being part of a committee is a really great way to meet to network and then meet attorneys that are practicing in something that you want to do. Irina, any resources that you would recommend?
Well, of course, I also agree that utilizing your career services is a great idea. Having worked at New York Law School for almost 10 years in employee relations and student advising, and now at NYU Law. And by the way, now I work with alums, right? So some people don't even realize that even after you graduate, you can go back to a counselor in career services at your law school, and they are usually happy to support you, and they can help with resume edits, cover letter drafting, mock interviews. This is what I do every day, right? So just remember that, and don't be shy to ask questions and be proactive with your needs. I also agree with Brenda that I really benefited from reaching out to people who had shared experience with me, right? Members of my family or community who are not lawyers, but they understood what I was going through. I saw them succeed. They became my role models, including my mom, who was not a lawyer, but she started at UPS in a very senior, in a junior role as a programmer, and over the course of over 25 years rose through the ranks, became a senior manager, and a very well respected professional, right? So look for people who are your cheerleaders, who get you, who want you to succeed. I did join the City Bar Career Advancement and Management Committee when I was thinking of pivoting out of the law, and it was really helpful to connect with people who've made similar career transitions, and they were working in professional development and other roles at law schools and law firms outside of a firm environment in practicing roles. So that was super helpful. And as far as mentors, I think that's super helpful. Brenda, you mentioned it. I agree with you. And I would say that while it's important to connect with people who are similar to you, also don't be afraid to seek mentors who are different from you, but who inspire you to succeed, who believe in you, who give you great advice, right? And sometimes you're surprised by those connections, right? And people you don't necessarily expect to be your mentors become really important people in your life.
So for me, I would say the Bar Association, right? So I'll give you my own personal experience. When I was a high school student here in New York City, I was part of the Thurgood Marshall summer law internship program. So I did get a chance to work in a lot of different corporate environments. I worked for Scholastic and McGraw-Hill in their legal department. So that was very important. And the people who hired me knew that I was a first generational college, potential college student and potential lawyer. So they took an interest and they nurtured, whatever they saw in me to ensure that I would succeed. I think at the undergraduate and at the law school level, the Career Services Office is very important. One of the things that I participate in with Indiana University is they do have programs where they try to pair alumni up with first generational students to give them that mentorship, to give them that advice, and to kind of, work through some of the kinks and some of the things that we wouldn't necessarily know how to navigate. So I think the schools, programming geared towards first generational students and understanding what their needs are that are specific to them outside of, what the regular curriculum is, whether it's, just understanding like OCI, networking, clerkships, different things of that nature. I think those are key programs that the schools can help to facilitate so that students are, aware of how they can, what their career pathing is and how they can succeed. So those are some of the things that I would say in response to that question.
Yeah, I think this is a great question because that's kind of the whole point of this panel, right? It's to provide at least information on what we know, um, I guess, about what could be helpful. And I think there are two things for me specifically, and the first one's a little bit touchy. It's the internet. There's a lot of horrible information out on the internet, and I would ignore 90% of it. But especially for first gen professionals who have never interacted with the law, places like Vault or Chambers is amazing because you get to learn about the culture of firms, you understand what their practice areas are, you know what they're good at, and you can go on the firm's website to find people to go along with what everyone's been saying. Networking is such a cornerstone of how you can find mentors in the space. And during OCI and during interviews, Vault and Chambers were indispensable for me because it gave me an insight into environments and cultures that I never would have understood. And I think when you're at that stage already, when you are talking to law firms, it's really more of a gut check, right? Do we like this person? Can we see ourselves working at midnight with this person? Can I grab a beer at the, post-work event with this person? And, can they hold like a 30-minute conversation? Those are things that you can sort of learn through descriptions on the internet, again, Chambers and Vault, to get a sense of the culture of the type of firm it is. And the second thing is peer guides. I use the term peer guides instead of mentors because to me, it's if you're all in law school, I don't necessarily view like a 3L myself to a 1L as like a mentor. I'm their counterpart. I'm their peer. I just have a year or two ahead. Where I think where we get into the mentorship area is like perhaps 5 or 10 years ahead. But I think that's exactly the point, right? You want someone a year or two out from your position to tell you about their experience and what they predict will happen in the future. And I think now more than ever, the 2Ls, 3Ls, and the brand new associates have an insight into OCI that sometimes schools may not even have because they are directly interfacing with law firms. And I don't know if everyone's aware, but OCI has dramatically been pushed forward, where 1Ls are now interviewing for their 3L positions shortly after their first semester grades. And that's where, you know, my term peer guides like 2Ls and 3Ls can provide such amazing insight, because for a first generation professional, like a law student, they may not know. They think OCI is occurring their 2L fall or 2L summer right before they begin 2L fall, when in fact the applications have already opened up for summer associate positions. And I think that specific example is why I think peer guides are so important.
Yeah, thank you all. For everyone that mentioned career services, your check is in the mail. I would say that I think I agree with a lot of what everyone said. I have nothing to add there, but I would say that Chambers and Vault are excellent resources. You know, when I was in law school, Vault, I mean, Chambers was still a book, and I remember OCI having my Vault book and going everywhere with it like it was, you know, like a stuffed animal. So those are all great resources. The mentors are very important. And then, yeah, you know, work with all of your resources. One extra resource I would say outside of the large firm space is martindale.com. If you're seeking for law firms in your area that have a specific practice area, but you know, you're not necessarily aimed at the big law firms, Martindale is a great place to search by practice area, by geographic location, and it'll produce you a list of firms that practice something specific. So say, you know, you're searching for a job for 2L summer, not necessarily in the big law space, and you want to find a firm that practices bankruptcy law. You could use martindale.com, and then you could add New York, New York, Brooklyn, New York, and it'll produce a list of attorneys and also law firms that practice that. So you could use that to generate a list of firms to target in your outreach when you're searching a job. So Chambers Associate, so Chambers is great. Vault is great. Martindale's another resource that I use with my students all the time for the job search. But I don't have anything to add because I think those are the resources that I would recommend, you know, within law school and outside of law school, especially the city bar. You know, again, this whole program is not just a plug the city bar, but I was a New York City Bar Association diversity fellow my 1L summer. And that I was placed in Bank of New York Mellon, and like that was really instrumental into my career path because I got a taste of what it's like to work on Wall Street my 1L summer. And that enabled me to really break into corporate law. You know, without that program and without that, you know, the city bar, I don't know if I would have gotten to where I did in my career without it. So the city bar is a fantastic resource. And then beyond that, the network of, you know, diverse attorneys and really all the committees of the city bar have been very, very helpful for me. So, you know, again, I don't want to retread, but it has been really impactful in my own career.
Can I say
So,
one more thing, Heath?
yeah, of course.
I love the conversation about mentorship because I think it means a lot for all of us, but we have to remember that it's like a two-way street. You have to be a good mentee as well, and that's something I wrote down that I really wanted to address. Like it's kind of on you to nurture that mentor-mentee relationship, and the better you can do that, hopefully they'll reciprocate. And it doesn't always land. Like there are definitely people out there who I thought we had a great relationship, whether they're busy or simply don't want to bear the burden of another relationship, and people are busy and you can't take it too personally. Still do your best to nurture that mentor-mentee relationship.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I've ran mentor programs before, and I would say that the biggest thing is if you're part of a formal mentor program, it might not always be a perfect match, but it's definitely worth following up. But informal mentors, I think, are some of the most most beneficial mentors that you could have. And it is a matter of following up. And you know, if you're a law student or someone more junior, the onus is really on you. If your mentor is someone that's more senior than you or very senior, they're going to be very, very busy. And you know, you might email them on a Tuesday where they got 300 emails. If they don't get back to you for a couple of days or weeks, you know, you got to follow up with them. If you have more time, you should really leave that. But then also be creative. You know, if you go to a meeting with your mentor, think about what you want to talk about. Don't just ask for a meeting just and, you know, expect them to leave the conversation. You should go to meetings with your mentor and have things planned. So I think that is the best way to get a lot out of a mentor relationship. But yeah, it does require work, just like anything else in this area, in this industry. So the next one.
Can I just add one other additional thing, which is to kind of piggyback off some of what was already said. I think informational interviews are an integral part of this process as well. And I have like a script that I share with folks, you know, these are the, you're asking someone for their time, whether it's 15 minutes, 20 minutes, can I pick your brain? Have a sort of a structured, list of things that you want to find out about that role, because, if you're seeking a particular role, this way you can find out from an informal basis, what's the culture like? How do you grow your career at this particular company? Those sorts of things, so that this way, and come away from that question with like another person that you can connect with, and of course, LinkedIn is a big, key part of that. The virtual, connection as well. So I just wanted to mention that as well.
Thank you. So changing gears a little bit, talking about identity and how it's impacted your particular career path, how would you all say that your identity as a first generation attorney has impacted your decision making along your career path? And even if it's just one example, that's okay.
So for me, I've always identified as a hard worker, and I tie that back to being a first generation student, because having the blueprint of my parents being such hard workers and coming to a country, not knowing the language, not knowing anyone, and just building a whole successful life. So I always, that has always stayed with me. And I've always felt such a responsibility to live up to that. And so my identity has always been that of a hard worker. And that has impacted my career path in that I've always sought to have a career and a job with meaning, and not just have a job. I felt very cognizant of the fact that I had that luxury, and that's something my parents didn't have. And I know that's something that they really wanted for me. And I think that's very common with a lot of immigrant parents, that they want the next generation to do better than the last. So for me, that has really guided my career path in terms of finding a career with purpose that really speaks to me, and not just, finding a job that's just going to pay the bills. So that's how I've identified it.
I would say, I guess in a similar vein, I think that the values instilled in me by my parents were super important to me, including, perseverance and working hard. But I also feel that sometimes that held me back, in the sense that I just told myself that I have to kind of put my head down and work really hard, and I will be recognized for my achievements. And, I realized very quickly at my first job, right, that that wasn't enough, right? And I just wasn't prepared. I didn't know how to go about talking about myself, how to network with other people, or how to make connections and make that as part of my job. Like, how do I advance my career, not just do well by working hard, right? That wasn't part of my mentality initially. And also, I associated, I created this career success, this version of what a career success should look like, right? Based on my expectations of, what accomplishments should look like in my life, until I saw a disconnect between what was meaningful and what was fulfilling and what I was doing. And so I think at that time, this is how I, engaged in self-reflection, and that led me to coaching, right? Because I started coaching myself. I started looking for advice and pathways and solutions, and what motivated me to do certain things in my life. So it turned out to be a helpful journey of self-discovery that also led me to a meaningful path of helping others. But in many ways, I think my experience as a first-gen lawyer was, helpful, but was challenging, especially initially, was all the sort of self-imposed expectations.
So I think it's just, being intentional about, the spaces and the communities that you're a part of, and thinking about, how your identity as a first generational lawyer can help others, as they come along in their, in their career path. So you know, I just think it's, you know, the things that you get involved with, like, for instance, like, you know, being a part of CAM is one community that I think is helpful for me to be able to give back, you know, in other ways. And also, I think it's just, you know, using your emotional intelligence and using the resources that you have at your advantage to, you know, be able to help other people to kind of, you know, come along as they're, you know, framing their career paths and you know, discovering what it is that they want to do when they get to, you know, whatever stage they're trying to achieve.
Yeah, I agree with what everyone said so far. I mean, all of those points are so important, but one thing that I really consider, like especially the hardworking aspect that Brenda mentioned, like we get so much from our family, and you know, they do have to work so hard for us to be in this position. But it also made me comfortable with decoding unfamiliar things. Like you're outside the professional bubble, so you don't get that direct interaction a lot. And you may see it in, I don't know, like shows or movies, or you hear about it, but you really don't get it until you get it. But that's also the case with most of our experiences as first gen generally. And I think being comfortable with really unfamiliar situations is sort of like the hallmark of my identity, I think, helping navigate and using those like skills to navigate unfamiliar territory for me was really important.
Thank you guys. And yeah, I would like to reiterate, like, I think you're the first generation. I'm also the oldest of three boys. And I always had that you have to work hard. My parents both worked my entire life. My dad at times held 2, 3 jobs. And I always had that, you have to work hard instilled in me. And that really propelled me through undergrad, through law school. And I always had the feeling of, I guess, the underdog feeling of, I'm first generation, I'm the first person to be an attorney in my family, but also I went to Hofstra. So, there was 3 attorneys, 4 attorneys at my firm that went to Hofstra versus the T14 in other schools. So I always had that mentality that I have to do a good job, or the next person that comes from where I come from isn't going to get this job. So it always kind of fueled me and pushed me forward. But then in a different way, being first generation attorneys actually would help me step away from the practice of law. But because I'm first generation, and because I never cared about the prestige or anything like that associated with practicing law. And, for me, my family would be happy for me no matter what I'm doing. I didn't have to be a lawyer. I didn't have to, uphold the family business. So for me, when it was time to leave the practice of law, I think being the fact that I was the first person in my family to do it, the only person in my family to do it, it actually helped me realize, like, I don't have to do this if I don't want to do this. So just kind of, if I'm not, you're being in first gen, like, you could do anything. And also that made me realize I don't have to do this. And if it kind of frees you in a certain sense, because you don't have to do what everyone before you has done. So I think that it was actually helping me. It helped me when I was ready to decide to step away from the practice law. So I think it was very helpful there. And in all my positions, also going from a large firm to a mid-sized firm, I think it was very, very helpful, because, like, actually not knowing was actually helpful for me in those particular circumstances. So, there's a lot of challenges and rewards that come along with being a first generation attorney, a first generation law student. What would each of you say that some of the challenges were? And I think we discussed a lot of the challenges, but some of the challenges and some of the rewards that you experienced as a first generation attorney or student.
The challenges are just that the cluelessness that you can feel, not knowing, or that feeling that everyone knows, information that you don't really know. And, giving that example that Willis gave, I'm fairly sure if I was a first year, I would not know that information. And so, that having somewhere where you could obtain that information, I think would have been incredibly helpful, or seeking it out. But just not knowing the process, just the little things. Like, I remember even applying to law school, it felt like such a daunting experience. In terms of the successes and the rewards, I think even all the really mini successes, like when you do your first trial, when you take a first statement, let's say as a prosecutor of a defendant, all these firsts, that you put yourself out for, you volunteer for everything. I think those mini successes are very rewarding. I think particularly not growing up in the world of lawyers and the same world of legal community that people who had parents who have lawyers, I do feel it feels very gratifying when you have those mini successes. So I guess my advice on that would be to, really embrace those moments and embrace how far you've come, and how far you've come, how good it feels to have your hard work pay off. And even if it doesn't necessarily go the way you think it might go, the fact that you put yourself out for it and you tried, I think can feel rewarding as well.
Yeah, Brenda, I remember like feeling clueless. You mentioned this word clueless, and it just sort of resonates with me because, like not understanding the legal market initially, having gone through OCI, and I was fortunate to receive multiple offers, but I had no way of distinguishing between different firms or knowing like what was important to me. How do I make this super important decision? My first job out of law school that's supposed to mean so much. How do I decide that what should I be looking at, right? So that feeling of like I need information, I need advice, where do I find it, right? And I relied on my parents, especially my mom, quite a bit to give me like life advice or career advice, but she would always say, I don't know what it's like in terms like what you do, right? Like I can give you general advice, but as far as, advice relating to your legal career, you have to make choices for yourself. You have to talk to other people. But at the same time, the reward is that you feel like, okay, I'm a self-made professional. Like I'm a self-made woman. I did this. Nobody gave me any favors. They did, nobody gave me a job or handed anything to me, everything that I've earned in my life, um, I'm super proud of, right? And so that's an amazing feeling. And I think it's something to celebrate and to recognize. And it also encourages you to be proactive in your career and to embrace challenges and to kind of propel yourself forward and not expect anyone to do things for you.
So I think for me, it's feeling the pressure to succeed. I had like younger siblings that were coming up behind me, and they were looking to me to be the successful, first generational person. I do also think that this may resonate for some people in the audience as well, which is, trying to balance your personal as well as your professional identities as well as your, finances, right? Because you don't always come from a place where you can financially manage all of the things that you need to successfully get through law school, because you have the expense of law school, you have the expense of the bar exam and all of the other things that are attendant to that. So I just want to acknowledge that that's also something else that is a challenge. But I think the reward is, trying to figuring out how to get the monies to kind of get over that hurdle, trying to figure out, how to be resourceful and overcome some of those challenges. And that's where some of the, the networks and the people that you have within your, your sort of community can help you, I guess, address some of that and get over that hump.
I think this challenges conversation is so interesting because the same skills that you need to overcome these challenges are also the same skills that probably will make really good attorneys. So it's exciting to sort of hear and look at it from that perspective. And I think one of the biggest challenges today or for the future law student is there really no more excuses. I think information asymmetry is as low as it's ever been. The legal industry is well documented now. There's a lot of statistics that are available. There are now industry commentators that focus on the law the same way that they've focused it on, investment banking or the private equity industry. And you can almost learn vicariously through from the sidelines. Books, networking opportunities, and alumni from your undergrad or alumni from your law school can really help expose you to what's out there. And I think that's the hard part, right? There's no more excuses, but what you get out of that is a sense of ownership of your career. And I think that's really gratifying. And it's really powerful to know that you can overcome this challenge to actually find what you need.
Thank you. And I think more on a personal level, I would say that the challenge is really, your support system, not understanding what you do, or, at any stage, being in law school, they don't really understand why you're so busy all the time. When you're a lawyer, I was in capital markets and mergers and acquisitions. My family don't even know what those things are. Like the definition of what I practice, they don't even know. When I was looking to transition, my mom's like, why don't you just do real estate closings? Like, yeah, I never did that. So I think in terms of the support, I think, my wife's an attorney, but she's a litigator, so very different. But like the support system, like, it's you have your peers in class and stuff like that, and then other attorneys you work with. But like, you want to talk to your mom about what you do, you want to talk to your mom, you want to talk to your dad about like what challenges you're going through, and then just have like they understand that you're working hard, they understand that you're struggling, but just it's challenging for them to just literally for my entire career, my parents have no idea. Anything to this day have no idea what I've done. And that is challenging just on a personal level. But I would say that, it's also the flip side of that. It's really rewarding to be able to, some of the transactions that I worked on were some really, IPOs, some like large mergers. It was really, really fascinating to get to work on those things. And it's like, wow, like I could actually like pick up a newspaper and hand it to my parents, say, hey, I actually worked on that deal. So I think that was really rewarding. And just like, I know that none of like my friends or family have ever done anything like that. So just to be, I felt like an astronaut. Like I felt like an astronaut being the first person to get to do these things. So I think that was what I found very rewarding and challenging. So like, no one knew, but at the same time, like I am blazing my own path and doing things that no one in my family has even dreamed about doing before. So that I really did enjoy. So, I think that like Willis said that, it's a great time to be a first generation attorney, but I would say that in some ways there's advantages to being a first generation attorney. And one I think about is this could actually be an advantage in interviews. So for me, I think that in interviews, I think being first generation helped me because I never had a perception of what attorneys were supposed to be or supposed to sound like. So I never went into an interview thinking that, oh, I need to talk a certain way or they're looking for a certain thing. And in my interviews, I was always myself. And I think in my career, I've always been as close to myself as I could be. And I actually had career counselors told me that I should change the way I talk, or, I have a Staten Island accent, even though I've never stepped foot on Staten Island. I'm from Long Island. And I never really changed who I am. And I think that being myself and being genuine, just because I was naive and I didn't know any other way to be, and I didn't know how I should be. So I think being myself served me very well on interviews. So are there certain advantages that you would all say that you have being a first generation student, at least during the interview process or, in the application process in general?
Yeah, Keith, that really resonated with me, what you're saying about being yourself. I didn't know any other way to be. So I never really thought of that until you mentioned it, but you're right. I think that is such a great benefit of being a first generation student. And yeah, I feel like and I think it really helps you because you can also find the place where you fit in the best. In terms of like people that, just really like you for being the way that you are, not trying to be something different. So I think there's so much value in that. In terms of, I actually really think being a first generation student can be such an asset during an interview. I think, what some people might view as a weakness is really your strength. There's so much that you can do and talk about in terms of being a first generation student. I think there could be many different talking points, whatever resonates with you, you could talk about, and I wouldn't go on and on, but you could talk about even just having the blueprint of having parents that are extremely hardworking and how that has motivated you to be an extremely hard worker and that you follow that same blueprint for success. So I think there's just many different ways where you can talk about what you have seen and how you intend, and you have done that through law school. So I do really think that in some ways they're quite lucky to be able to draw from that.
Yeah, I would say it's so important to lead with authenticity. And I also believe that during the interviewing process, it helps you to stand out because you're memorable. The fact that you're different in some way is memorable, right? And that's what you want. And if you're able to share your story, because it's all about storytelling, right? People connect with your story, people connect with your narrative because you're being genuine and because they see something in you, those qualities that we've been talking about, right? Who made us that made us who we are and made us successful. So sharing those stories, of course, to the extent you feel it's appropriate, you're comfortable doing that, right? That can be super powerful and memorable. I also think that employers are concerned about hiring the right talent. They're asking themselves, is this person going to be self-entitled? What is their going, how they're going to behave when things get tough? Are they going to be, not just hardworking, but relatable? And can they relate to clients and other colleagues? Willis, to your point, working hard in the evening or grabbing a beer or socializing in some ways. And the fact that you have, different dimensions to yourself, that you have, maybe you speak another language or you have like an interesting experience in your life, right? That makes you unique. That makes you interesting. And the personal qualities that helped you to get where you are will hopefully make you a good employee, right? And that's important to employers that you're meeting with. So use that to your advantage.
So I think, ultimately employers want someone who's a problem solver, right? And I think by virtue of the fact that you've overcome so many things and gotten to that point, you've solved a lot of problems. So that in of itself is something that you can, talk about in your interviews to showcase that, you're the type of person who is resilient, you're resourceful, you're committed. And I think, just you're a team player, like, you're an individual person who brings those individual contributions to bear, but you also, because of the nature of, some of our backgrounds, we've had to sort of exist in this like communal way, where we think about not just our success, but the success that comes along with that by virtue of our success, showing, our families that, my success is your success. And so I think all of those are things that, as you kind of prep for those interviews, my sister and I do this all the time when we have interviews, we will coach each other. Like she will, we'll get on Zoom or, whatever, and we'll ask each other questions and we'll just kind of like get, do a dry run to get some of those jitters out. So I think, doing that and trying to just understand like what value are you bringing to that organization? I think that will kind of help you to figure out, what are those qualities that you want to emphasize to that hiring manager.
Yeah, I want to echo Simone's comment about being a team player. I think, some people might view the law or the practice of law as like this solitary thing. You're reading, you're writing, you're drafting, but really it's very collaborative. You're talking to people a lot and you're almost putting trust in other people. And it, vice versa, you are to be trusted. And I think we are uniquely positioned to be trustworthy because we have the skills associated with being a good team player, right? You've likely encountered adversity. You have struggled before. You have hopefully humility from your life experience, and those are all something that I love from all the people that I have worked with. And I think that could be that's really my big thing.
Great, thank you guys. So I only have a couple more questions here, then I want to save a little bit of time for if anyone in the audience has any questions for us. The next one will be, what are any ideas or suggestions that you would all have for law schools and or employers on how better to serve first generation law students and or lawyers?
Law school, my recommendation would be to have more regularity with their programs on first gen. Meaning, so, having, first gen program when in the fall of first year, just navigating the applying for that second summer associate. So they know that they don't have to go seek that out. Things like that. Also, have them on judicial clerkships, like pick a topic but have it geared towards first generation students, and have people former first generation students come in and talk to the group. But I would have that with like some fair regularity, even maybe just like once a month or even once, every few months, just so there's more exposure and the first generation students can see the different topics. And I think it would be very helpful.
I would just add for law schools, in addition to having programming, which I think is super important, I think it starts pretty early with the first counseling appointments. When counselors are meeting one else, it's important not to make assumptions, but ask open-ended questions, right? And help someone understand, again, why did you go to law school? What kind of career do you hope to create for yourself? How can I support you? What does success look like for you? What are you worried about? What's holding you back? How can we work together? Just, hearing what someone has to say, and then figuring out how to support them from there. I also think it's important to help students understand how their short-term career goals translate into their long-term goals and successes, what the career trajectory looks like, because oftentimes this is what's missing. Students don't have an awareness of that. They don't know much about the legal market. They don't know much about how one job leads to something else that they really want to be doing. So that long-term vision is super important. And on the employer side, I think we've talked about formal mentoring programs that are important and valuable, and sometimes they work great, and sometimes there's a sense of disconnect. But I think what's really even more important is to creating a culture where people feel at ease to be themselves. They feel comfortable asking questions. They feel that there's a culture that embraces, celebrates effort and growth from mistakes, and it's not punitive or judgmental, because everybody makes mistakes, right? So creating that sense of dialogue, right? Not just saying my door is always open, but actually having your door open and actually starting a conversation with someone who might be shy to have a conversation with you. That's what's really important. And of course, I think firms can invest in career coaching and career advising, not when things go wrong and someone needs to transition out of a job, but to help someone succeed and provide outside support in addition to all the support that they often have, in-house, that people may or may not take advantage of.
Yeah, Irina, I would say that last thing you mentioned, that really resonates with me, because when I left Fried Frank, one of the attorneys told me, like, why didn't you talk to me about this? Like, why didn't you tell me you were unhappy before? I'm like, I wouldn't have even a thought. Like, why would I tell a senior attorney that I'm not happy? And I think that it is very important that all firms and all types of legal employers check in on their employees, check in, regularly. I mean, I know that now more employers, especially the largest firms, are starting to bring in in-house career counselors. But I think it's important that they check in with their attorneys to make sure, like, every 6 months, a year, are you happy? Is there anything we could do? Are you not getting the type of work that you want to do? Is this practice group not for you? Are you struggling to keep up with the hours? Are you not getting enough hours? So I think that if they could check in with first generation attorneys, but attorneys overall for sure, I think it would be a lot better for both attrition, for retaining attorneys, but then also for attorneys to feel like they're supported. Because I didn't know, like, for me, the only options I ever saw were like leave. But maybe it was, maybe I could have switched to the M&A group and I would have liked that better. Or maybe I could have been on different deal flows and that would have made me happier. So I think that if firms could definitely support attorneys by just checking in, and it's saying just checking in sounds easy, but I understand with firms with 500, 1,000, 2,500 attorneys, that could be difficult. But I think that it's very encouraging to see that more firms are making these resources available to attorneys.
So I think, from the law school perspective, offering, practical workshops on the things that, Willis talked about before, like the hidden curriculum. However, that's incorporated into the overall, curriculum. I'm not sure how to institute that, but I think it is good to have, practical things where people can role play, networking situations. How would you approach someone if you were in a room or on Zoom, or, different things like that, so that you have some, real concrete examples of, how to do certain things. I was on a panel last week at homecoming at Indiana, and someone came up to me after the panel and they said, I'm really interested in finding out about like public speaking. So I recommended Toastmasters. So people sometimes have questions about, practical like things that they can do to, and I'm always very like interested in knowing the how to, not just, oh, network. If someone says network, what does that mean? Like, how do I actually do that? So I think creating practical things like that. And I think at the employer level, like here, we have a first gen committee, right? And so, I think that from the first of all, creating, an affinity group where people of like, situations can get together, but then also creating other programs where people can like talk about like, how do I get feedback from, my supervising attorney, or how do I, I'm having an issue with like onboarding or mentorship and things of that nature. So there's a sounding board and there's someone in a senior capacity that can kind of guide those individuals. So those are the things that I would contribute to that question.
Yeah, I actually didn't think about, Simone, what you just mentioned of like rehearsing it in law school. Like that would be really, really interesting to see how a school can implement that. But I think that's one great way that I've never thought of. And the second thing is for perhaps, and this is not a judgment on BLS's career department, but all law schools, like maybe publish jobs data. I know the ABA has job data, but like having a finger on the pulse on what markets are hot and what markets are not, hiring trends, perhaps things that practicing attorneys may know, what people looking a lateral may know, but that information could also help law students just to get an idea of what they're stepping into. It, I think, helps them become more fluent on the speak of the legal industry, and I think it's almost like half the battle.
Yeah. Yeah, and Simone, we actually, in response to when we're planning, we have a program in November that basically will be a how to network program, and then we're having an in-person networking program with alumni. So first they'll learn how to approach networking, the questions, and then they'll have an opportunity, a low pressure opportunity, all with friendly alumni to actually practice those networking skills. And Willis, I don't think you had this, so I apologize, but it is something that we're implementing this year. But then, yeah, the job data is very important, and every year now has an annual legal recruitment summit, and that they publish really good data on what's going on in legal hiring, what practice areas are trending and stuff like that. But the issue with that is not really an issue. It's just that the data is always a little bit delayed because the reports come out and then it's last year M&A was hot. But since, because of regulatory changes, M&A is down in litigation, but we do have that information. But I think there's definitely ways that we can package it and provide it to students better. And I think that's a fair point. So, my last question is really geared towards the job market, because anytime I do a program, I'm a career counselor. I want to provide information on the job market. So my final question before we get into any Q&A that there might be, I would say, is what advice would you have for a first generation lawyer entering the job market? And Willis, if you haven't entered yet, but if you want to participate, you can answer this one as well if you'd like to.
Sure. And I guess I'll start. Sometimes being first gen isn't automatically like this. People don't know, almost maybe don't know what to think. And I think how I viewed it is that your accomplishments or your traits or your attributes don't get you the job, but the skills you gained by your lived experience gets you the job or helps you with the interview. So really lean into the skills and focus on the skills. Like instead of perhaps being super explicit, being like first gen oriented, think of the skills that you have gained and the challenges you've overcome and tell those stories. Because those are practical skills that law firms or any organization looking to hire you may want to know. And I think that's where like the greatest stories of your experience actually lie.
I would say, So one of my majors in college was history. So I love to do research. One of the things I think is, just trying to understand like where the trends are, like what are the quote unquote like hot or growth fields, so that you are able to position yourself for success. And joining the associations that will, allow you to continue to learn and grow in whatever field it is that you're, planning to go to, connecting with the people, whether it's through a bar association, whether it's through LinkedIn, informational interviews, different things like that, just to understand like where the profession is going so that you can position yourself, for success in the future, and continuing to build those relationships. So there's some continuity and that you're continually learning. Like that is such a big, important part of the process. Continue to learn and grow, and just be, I guess, flexible and open to that, because you never know when things are going to happen. Like right now, everyone is like excited about artificial intelligence, right? And that can come from so many different aspects. Like for me, from a project management, perspective, for lawyers, there's so many different things. So I think you just have to kind of keep your finger on the pulse of what's happening and just continuing to grow and to be open to learning continually.
I would just add that I agree that there's a lot of information out there, but it can also feel overwhelming. But it's still on you to understand what's important to you. What are your career drivers? What you are excited about, what you want to do professionally, and then look for opportunities that are aligned with those goals. Now, I do agree that it's important to be flexible and open-minded, and to know that your first job out of law school may not be your dream job, but also it needs to be a step in the right direction. We've spoken about skills. I agree with Willis. You have to be developing those substantive legal skills that will make you marketable, as well as people and leadership skills that will allow you to succeed in the future, right? So think about your potential career pivots and be like open-minded, but also thoughtful with respect to that process, right? Um, and of course, take advantage of all the resources, including inquiry services. Again, this is what I do. I work with alumni. So you have counselors when you're a student, you have resources even after you graduate, obviously privately, provide career coaching services. So there's a lot of support, both at your law school, hopefully at your employer, and beyond that. So take advantage of all of it, but it starts with you. And so I don't want to hear, I'll just do anything, I'll take any job. Get a job that you hopefully will love, or will take you as close to that job that you're going to love a year from now. And that's my advice.
Yeah, Irina, you actually took my piece of advice, which is always think about how the job you're taking sets you up for the next step. I think that that's very important because, most lawyers, I mean, look around at this panel, most people don't stay in the same job for their entire career. So always think about, even if you don't have a ton of options, but think about how the step you're taking is going to impact your career overall. Think about how this first job impacts the second one, impacts the one after that. And when you think about things, don't think, you should think about the now, think about the near term, but also think about the long term. So it's like, okay, I'm going to get this job. I'm going to be practicing X. I'm going to be getting a paycheck. But then also think about, all right, if I don't like this in 2 years or 3 years, what could I do? Or if I do like this and I get very good about this and develop these relevant skills and experience, what does that set me up for? So I think it's always, the way I phrase it, very, Irina definitely did a great job about explaining it very in detail. But I think the way to put it in a nutshell is think about how this step impacts your decision, how this job impacts the one that you'll get after this.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything all the panelists have said on this. I would also add that I would initially take stock of where your interest lies. And when I say that, I mean, just on a basic level, are you someone that's interested in public service? Or are you someone that wants to go on the firm path? And then within that subset, even figure out, let's say, if you do public interest, are you interested in policy making? Or are you interested in being a criminal defense attorney? Are you interested in being a judge someday? Are you interested in being a prosecutor? And similarly for the private sector, where does your interest lie? If you know, but I think just on the basic level, I would figure out just, are you looking private or public just initially? I think that will really help. And then within those subsets, cast a very wide net, because the job market is just very competitive. So I remember, all the jobs I applied to for second year, it was just a very wide net. And even when I was looking for my final job, you just have to apply to as many jobs that fit your interest, and just take it from there. In terms of networking, I would also, and I know Simone touched upon this, I think it's helpful to the extent that you could find people that are interested in what your dream job would be, or things that you're exploring. I would email people. The worst that they can say is no. But find a common connection, common thread. So if it's somebody that went to your law school, somebody on LinkedIn, oftentimes I find people, if they're too busy, they'll tell you. But even if you could just take like 5 minutes of their time, make it a very useful 5 minutes for yourself. What I would recommend is figuring out what the day-to-day is of what that person does, so you could see if you're even interested in this field, because I think that is the hardest thing to know as a lawyer. Are you even going to like that kind of field? And sometimes you don't know until you're in it. And then you might be like, oh, well, thought I would like this, but I don't. And some of that you can actually really figure out just by talking to people. You might not know all the ins and outs, but you'll have a really good sense of, is this work interesting? Is it just contract work? Do you like contract work? What's that like? What is the skill set involved in that? And like, what's your day-to-day? Because you might be somebody that might think that's really interesting, and you might be somebody that thinks that's really boring. So you don't want to be in that position and then find out, when it's not, when say it's too late, but ideally, you just want to do your homework on all of these issues, because unfortunately there is some level of, I've met a lot of attorneys that are, not satisfied, and then they go to someone like Irina, they go to like a life coach, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it'd be so great if you can get it right initially, just to see like where your interests lie.
Yeah. I agree wholeheartedly with that, Brenda. And I think that I tell my students in our initial meeting, there's 3 things you do to figure out what area of law you'd be interested in. You take courses, which is great to get the substance of the law, but then you go work and you speak to attorneys. And I think speaking to attorneys at the bare minimum is extremely important, because I loved securities regulation as a course, but then the practice of capital markets I didn't necessarily love it. And, speaking to more attorneys, I would have understand, like, okay, this is very accounting based. Do you want to draft disclosure? And just, that would have, then maybe a longer conversation, a little bit of soul searching would have really, really helped me to go in a different direction. So I think that's why I feel very, very passionate about the fact that people should talk to as many attorneys as they can, especially if you have no idea what the practice is like. Thank everyone so much for staying this whole time. And anyone that's still in attendance that would like to ask questions could either put them in the chat or in the Q&A. And before we get into that, I just want to say thank you so much to all of our panelists. You guys have all been very, very good. And I really appreciate all the insights. And, I wish I had these insights when I was in law school, because I think a lot of what you shared was very, very helpful. So the first question we have is from Anonymous. So the question is, for attorneys that are just starting in their career, how do you recommend getting assignments / more face time with senior attorneys or partners in a hybrid / remote work environment? Does anyone want to grab that, or I'm happy to address that if no one else would like to? Sure. So I think that it's definitely difficult in a hybrid or remote work environment, where it depends on like where your supervisors are. If none of your supervisors are in the office, that's extremely difficult. But if there's some hybrid form, I think that early in your career, it definitely makes sense to go in as much as possible. And for whoever is in the office, try to establish connection with them. And you'll find that if most people are remote, but some people are still in, going into the office will be very, very helpful. You'll stand out, and you'll also to be able to make connections with people, both for assignments, but on a personal level. So junior in your career, even if you're permitted to work remotely, I always recommend that people go into the office. I mean, it's not as comfortable, but again, that's a good way to establish connections. And then if you're in a situation, which this is happening sometimes, that no one's in the office, I would say that you should try to do the things that would happen in an office,
So I can tackle that because I kind of advise students from Indiana, and they now have something called fall break, which I wish I had when I was a law student. But anyway, so I try to encourage people, if they do have, breaks, like a fall break or something where you can come in person to New York City, try to set up meetings with people individually to meet up with them. But if you do have to do things virtually, I guess I would advocate for the informational interview. And if people want to reach out to me separately, I do have like a template of questions that you can ask folks. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn of like questions you should ask during that informational interview. And you can do searches on LinkedIn to kind of find folks that are in the area that you're interested in practicing in, or interested in doing a fellowship or whatever it is that your goal is, your pursuit is, and finding those individuals and trying to reach out to them, cold. But there's also a script that I can send you as well that says, these are the sort of things that you want to sort of like reach out to them and ask them, specifically for. I'm an alumni of blah, or, I'm looking to get into this. And you can talk about the things that are kind of leading you in that, career path, and then have that person, hopefully reach back out and you start developing a relationship. I know people who have done that and they've successfully, navigated that space. So it is doable. You just have to be very intentional and very strategic about how you do it.
In the same light, more firms or businesses, however you want to look at it, are doing informational sessions. And I think that's a good stepping stone to informational interviews. It'll seem more natural. Like I just got an email for Latham and Watkins, right? Like I would sign up for that, look at their panel of speakers, maybe shoot the speaker or the panelists like a thank you note, and see if they have anyone that you can connect with in a specific practice area. And I think it's like a tangible thing that you can sign up for, and your school should have that available on Simplicity or whatever other platform that's available for the school.
Flow Recruit, a lot of schools and large firms are using Flow Recruit and Flow Forward for events like that now.
And I was also going to say that your professors, they may have connections with folks in different markets, and they can also be a resource as well. So, use the resources that are around you. Go to office hours and, try to find out from them if there are ways that they can help you to connect with folks outside of your, general vicinity.
I would just add, as far as connecting with your alumni network, I think that can be super effective. And there are different ways to find alums of your law school, including most law schools have a LinkedIn alumni group that may have even subgroups based on practice area or different geographic regions. So that's one way to look. You can join and see who's part of that. Keith, I think you mentioned Martindale. You can search and by alumni of your school, right? There's the filter for that. And then practice area and geographic location. So you can filter by those criteria. There's a database called Firm Prospects that has, you can create a profile and then look at your alumni connections, and again, filter by geographic location and practice area. So there are different ways to connect and find the right people, but definitely informational interviews and, meetings and everything that everyone has mentioned can be super valuable.
Perm Prospects is really good. We just got it in the spring and it's a hit. I really love that resource. Does anyone else have any questions? I'll wait another minute if anyone wants to pop any questions into the Q&A. If not, I'll give the panelists 5 minutes back in their day so they all get back to their jobs in school.
Well, thank you so much, Keith, for the opportunity to present, and it's good hearing the ideas from the other panelists as well.
Thank you all so much. I really, really appreciate all of you participating in this panel. It's great to hear your backgrounds and really like to hear your advice. And I'll tell you this, I'll be using a lot of it in my counseling for students going forward.
Thank you, Keith. Thank you, everyone. It was a really pleasure to meet you all.
Yeah.
And it looks
Thank
like we
you.
don't have any more questions. So thank you guys so much. Thank you all
Thanks,
for coming.
everyone. All right,
Thank
enjoy
you.
the rest of your day. Take
Thank you
care.
for
Bye-bye.
attending.
Bye.